Hello, everyone. This is David Lee with our CSNP Cyber Stories podcast. I'll be your host today, lead content creator, and I've got a special guest, Eric Evans here, also a CSNP volunteer for some time now. Eric, I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Eric Evans. I am the R&D director here at cybersecurity nonprofit. I've been a member of the nonprofit for about a year now. Started the chapter, kind of restarted the chapter here in Atlanta, and then moved on to become the director of research and development for the global nonprofit. What we do is practical experience that complements that ones would get from a boot camp or from informal training in cybersecurity, or maybe they're new to cybersecurity and want to get their practical kind of applications done. And so we offer a platform to do that through the use of GitHub, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, and the such. So if you can surmise by all of those services I just mentioned, I am a cloud security expert. I specialize in AWS and GCP. I work for a consultancy called Scalesec, which I kind of have in my shirt right here, where I work as a cloud security consultant for my day job. I've worked with small, big companies, everything from startups, two-person startups, to Fortune 5 companies, and everywhere in between, and a lot of different engagements and so on. Yeah, definitely happy to be here. Happy to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, that's great, Eric. Thanks for dropping in here. And your industry, this whole area of cloud security is like a huge spotlight these days. And it's almost like I woke up overnight one day and all of a sudden, every security professional I know is now scrambling for their AWS certifications. And it's almost become a part and parcel to all practitioners just about who want to remain, who want to keep their skills relevant to the movement of technology. Can you talk about that kind of progression into this cloud environment, and what has it been more of like a climb for you, or has it always been just a big common thing for you?
Yeah, good question. So I'll speak first about the industry trend towards cloud. The industry has been trending towards cloud for the past decade or so. Enterprises have been branding it as a digital transformation as they move their data centers into the cloud, as they find that the operational expenses that are associated with traditional data centers sometimes are not worth the case. This is shown by many kind of symptoms, such as vendor fragmentation that happens with on-premise software, or hardware, I should say, software and hardware, by needing to upkeep these physical systems and protect them physically as well, with like security guards and having fire safety measures, having compliance around that. It creates a lot of overhead for organizations, especially if they're trying to move fast, and if they're trying to innovate rapidly, and if they're trying to take advantage of brand new technologies. And those types of factors come into the business when you need to compete in the field that you're currently working in, whether it be healthcare, whether it be technology, transportation industries booming in the cloud right now. So many different areas or so many different sectors are just booming into the cloud and want to continue to grow in that area. And so with the global pandemic that's going on this year, it's kind of it's rapidly brought the reality to businesses that they need to have a cloud presence. They need to have a presence where no matter what happens, they would be secure in a certain way, or guaranteed a level of service for their services software as they continue to innovate. We see a lot of companies or organizations within companies spring forward by moving into the cloud. They kind of re-architect their applications to a more modern kind of way, like microservices, a lot of different types of like service-oriented architecture, leveraging brand new technologies like HashiCorp Terraform infrastructure as code, service mesh with console, vault secrets management. A lot of these different types of technologies are helping to keep industries competitive. And with that comes security. As industry is continuing to progress, they are needing folks to secure these technologies. So one way I like to say it is they like to embed security within their pipelines, within their organization, within how they define cloud structures, which is very different than on-premise. And with that comes the rise of things like DevSecOps, comes the rise of things like security services that are just offered as platforms that could be easily integrated within the cloud through a marketplace, for instance. So yeah, the industry trend there has boomed and has been accelerated by the ongoing events that's going on in the world. Me myself, I've been ahead of the curve so far. I hope to continue to be that way. I was kind of born into the cloud. I originally started as a software developer, and I was just creating things on Amazon because I didn't have my own server farm, or I didn't have my own server or dedicated ISP to host websites or things like that for the company I was working for. So instead, we just signed up for an AWS account. We created infrastructure there, and then one thing led to another. I became a DevOps engineer with the company I was interviewing for. Originally as a software developer, found out that I can do AWS, so they brought me into a DevOps position. That led into a DevOps and security position, and I really did become a DevSecOps practitioner, and finding out that as I'm defining this cloud as code, that you can embed security within it and have it secure by design. And that's what I now practice every single day.
Yeah, that's amazing that you were already in this space, and then it's like the whole world kind of went to heck when COVID hit, and now we are seeing where I've heard it said that COVID accelerated remote work by
Absolutely.
I think at least a decade. And so I think you're saying it also accelerated the move to cloud, and and now we're also seeing like a competitive advantage to the agility, the elasticity of using it. So what do you think is the where do you see the trend in the industry? Is this affecting small businesses all the way to larger ones? Is this who do you think needs to be prepared to perform security in the cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm seeing change across the board. Any company that's starting in a pandemic doesn't want to wait the time to have delayed shipments of equipment, for instance, to set up a data center. Doesn't want physical presence or people being together for long periods of time due to social distancing guidelines. Doesn't want to rent out existing colo facilities because of lack of or reduction of staffing at those facilities to actually have that kind of hardware presence. And so with that, we see the move to cloud. And if you're a business just starting off, you want to, you want your ideas to be out there quick. You want to be able to do something easily. So signing up for an AWS account takes about a minute. I think same thing for a Google Cloud account, Azure account, whatever it may be. You can either have a minute or take a month, your choice. And then for larger organizations, as I was saying before, having like the physical presence and everything creates a lot of overhead, creates a lot of physical staff that needs to be there, and as such, they are adopting to the situation, concurrent with that information and moving things to the cloud, migrating to the cloud, so to speak. So there's a lot of job potential that's being created because of that. We're seeing folks who are specializing in migrating to the cloud in secure fashion, being cloud security experts who are in very high demand right now because of that. So definitely, I'm seeing it from the older organizations that are migrating to the cloud to the new organizations that are just starting up, and even for those small and medium businesses. Whatever physical presence they've had, they're either migrating towards cloud or they're investing more into cloud. Definitely, it's a spectrum for sure.
This is something that's affecting everybody, and it's really warping how we use our systems. And it sounds like this was something inevitable. Like we were going to be up in the cloud as a competitive advantage anyway, but now with the shift to remote, we're suddenly pushing forward, and now there's a spike in demand for this kind of expertise. And I've seen this even in just casual conversation at events, people asking about things like Kubernetes security, container security, AWS, how can it be penetration tested, things of that nature. And I see more and more of those questions now than I did before this whole lockdown mess. So I think
Definitely.
there's 100% truth to that. There has to be this trend that's now more of a spike where the industry suddenly now needs this expertise at it's a very higher demand than before.
Definitely. And you hear a lot less about on-premise vendors and other technologies that are very much geared towards on-premise. That could be a result of, not as many conferences happening, where folks have physical presence, where they're bombarded with vendor advertisements and so on. And folks are beginning to think about, well, my contracts are coming up with these guys. I haven't heard much from them lately, but I've been hearing a lot about a lot of the buzz that's being generated about cloud from other companies. Maybe I should take a look at that. That's something common that I've seen a lot at, especially like virtual conferences that are sometimes even hosted on cloud.
Yeah, it's cool now to see more like demonstrations of security scenarios actually take place in these modernized, containerized clusters instead of your traditional topology, which is like a DC, an AD on a LAN, local.
Right.
That's like the traditional topology that I always worked in back when I was.
Right.
But even in my previous company, we were transitioning already. So we had our most critical systems already up in the cloud. And so we ended up with this hybrid thing that we were messing with for a long time. And
Yeah.
so it was definitely, I agree, it was definitely inevitable to be in this position where now, as security professionals, everybody feels this need to just get at least some certification to stay in tune with what's happening in the
Mm-hmm.
market. So what do you think that means for the average, say, SOC technician or analyst, or even the newcomers moving into this field? Are we becoming like DevSecOps by default, or what's happening, and how do we approach this changed market?
Yeah, the industry is definitely shifting left when it comes to security. It's bringing it more to finding security flaws earlier on, being able to detect threats faster, and so on. With the cloud, it just exacerbates that kind of meaning. It really brings it closer to the practitioners who are actually working in the cloud. What this means for SOC professionals and other on-premise professionals who haven't thought about cloud as much as recently is, there's a whole entire influx of education going on around that. I've seen so many new courses come up, so many new webinars come up, just bombarding with information on that. The certifications themselves have been starting to be updated as well to kind of keep up with the modern innovations that happen within the cloud, new services that come out. Those types of things have not slowed down since the pandemic. But there's also, with all this information, folks don't know where to start many times. There's so many different realms within cloud. It's like, okay, I started up a virtual machine, but do I do serverless now, or do I do containers, or do I try some of my traditional kind of things with subnets and firewalls and all of that? There's so many different paradigms in cloud, and what I'm hoping that we can do is help folks kind of navigate that realm and figure out where to start first. So the different certifications, most people default to like the cloud practitioner for AWS, or the Azure fundamentals, or the Google Cloud Associate Cloud Engineer. Those are very foundational kind of elements or certifications that folks can get to kind of put their foot into the door, so to speak, to say that, hey, in addition to all this experience that I've had with traditional on-premise security, I also can speak confidently about the cloud. It's like I said, it's always good to get your foot into the door with that. But I'm also seeing a lot of folks who get that certificate who still don't understand the cloud. I do a lot of interviewing for the company that I work for. And we see these folks with 10, 15 years of experience applying for a staff level position because they have an AWS certificate. They're actually able to get through to the tech screen. But whenever we start talking about the cloud, they rely a lot on their old technologies and old ways of thinking. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of folks who don't have that practical experience yet, which is consistent with everything we've been saying. It's almost like an exponential timeline that's been adoption to the cloud. It's like we've been pushed, we've been thrusted to do that. And that's why I think it's very important for folks to have some kind of practical experience, which luckily enough, it's easy to, like I said, sign up for an AWS account, go through some tutorials and things like that. And that's also what I try to accomplish with R&D as well, is set up some projects, like a whole bunch of mini capstones that I can work with you guys on and mentor and learn, teach, and we can learn in the process while working on something really cool. So I'm definitely finding the lack of hands-on experience as a result of rushing to get a certification is one of those trends whenever it comes to folks trying to stay relevant within the market.
Yeah, I think that's also maybe a symptom of certifications being there's almost an obsession with them right now. It's like this rabid fever that we all have, like, oh no, I don't have that cert. And that means I'm at the back of the pack now. And that's true not only in cloud, but like, geez, like so many security disciplines, people are just sweating because they don't have that, that cert that they see everywhere. But like you said, it doesn't necessarily translate to real world experience with that exact subject matter. It just means that you gathered some foundational knowledge and some basics, you put it together for an exam. So I wonder, how do we, as an instructor, I always wonder how we like close that gap. Like what do we do differently in the modern training ecosystem to get people caught up and propelled forward and to address that need? And I wonder if it's a lack of hands-on, or is it a lack of maybe literature, lab environments, perhaps? What do you think?
In my opinion, it's completely hands-on in labs. If there's no actual implementation of cloud concepts, cloud security concepts is actually more specific than that, then one cannot really speak competently about it. Sure, they may be able to answer some questions that are known to be on exams about the specific thing in question. Like if I mentioned serverless and I mentioned event-oriented architecture, I'd expect folks who have taken the cloud security practitioner to come up with a set of answers. But then if I bring it one step further and I say, okay, now I'm going to give you a scenario, and this is based on a client that I actually work with. Tell me how you would work through this problem. They tend to not have the knowledge of how to navigate through a different type of scenario than what you would face on a certification exam. What I'm referring to is reference architectures. So certification exams, teach you different patterns, different reference architectures. It's like if you have a serverless app, you should secure it this way. If you have a platform as a service, you should secure it this way. If you have an infrastructure as a service, you should secure it this way. In reality, workloads are a mix. They get very intermingled between them, especially as companies are just throwing things into the cloud. Sometimes they're complete lift and shifts from their data centers into the cloud. So they come with like some old technology. Like I've seen things like Palo Alto firewalls or FortiGate kind of firewalls or Thales HSMs that they're virtualizing from on-premise to the cloud, because those folks who don't have experience in the cloud still need to maintain this stuff. And so that's what they're used to. And so that's what they brought with them to the cloud. And then when those are things that are not covered in certification exams. No one would ever ask you, hey, you have a customer who has a DMZ, quote unquote, set up in the cloud. Palo Alto firewalls that are routing to subnets, and you have a different firewall in each subnet, and it's tough to even start to wrap your head around those types of things without having experience. Now, what I'm proposing is not to purchase like these very expensive equipment, bring it into the cloud and have people work with it, but is to learn patterns by doing specific like tutorials, or by doing guided study, directed study with cloud practitioners, to learn how to at least navigate the question. I don't think during interviews it's ever a bad thing to ask a little bit more information, like, oh, I haven't worked with that proprietary thing that you just asked with. How does it work? Traffic flow, or how does it work this, and kind of guide through it during the question. So definitely the hands-on experience. But it's one thing to just open up a cloud account and then have the whole entire screen there, and pointing and clicking everywhere to do things. You have to have some kind of focus, or some kind of goal that you'd want to achieve. And that's something that I think certifications are missing, and instructors in many ways kind of gloss over the hands-on necessity whenever it comes to cloud security. And I don't necessarily have a silver bullet answer to that, because it's expensive to set up these scenarios. It's when I say expensive, I don't mean just monetary, but also time, effort, and also like effort from not just setting up scenarios in the cloud, but also automating those scenarios on demand as folks need to do them, but also guiding folks through that scenario, troubleshooting, if you will, right? It's like you need troubleshooters for the cloud as well as you're working through things. Maybe something doesn't work right, and folks need to need some assistance in setting up or working through infrastructure or security, or maybe they're doing a pen test and Amazon's blocked them because they found that same signature in many other pen tests, and that's all interfacing with AWS and troubleshooting through that. I feel like the cloud companies, if they really want folks to continue to adopt in cloud, need to extend an olive branch to those who are learning cloud, and give them some new ways and scenarios to get that hands-on experience. And they've done certain things, like Google has a playground with their cloud. AWS has a whole bunch of labs and things. There's Quick Labs, which is really cool for Google Cloud, that gives that hands-on experience. And I think that's the best I've seen so far to really address the situation. Linux Academy as well has been really good with the sandboxes and stuff.
Yeah, I've seen those, and they're always different every time I go back and look at them. Like it's definitely like this thing that's being scaffolded like as we go, because
Yeah.
I think I went to, who was it? I think Azure's, that one changed a bunch of times, and then AWS's constantly is different. If I go back a month later, it's like a whole different site.
Yeah.
Really, like I'll bookmark stuff and then I go back and it's just gone, and then it's somewhere else.
Yeah, and I'm sure they've employed DevOps engineers to set up those scenarios. It's like, hey, I am an instructor and I want to teach folks about this subject. Can you set up a scenario that will do this thing? And then I think the combination of having kind of like the steps that you should do with the cloud thing would help with the actual cloud console. Would like in one screen and the other screen is actually really useful. Now there is a pitfall to that. I think a lot of folks like to get their certificate of completion for like Linux Academy and any kind of kind of self-led course. And with that, they will tend to copy those commands and paste them in there, just blindly, just doing that, just so they can get through it. I feel like certifications should have a hands-on aspect to them. That way, when folks are scrambling to get these certifications, they're that's the forcing function to get that practical knowledge. I think that would be another good way to address it as well, is just embed that practical knowledge onto the certification as well.
I can't agree more. And I try to support those certification bodies that do embrace the whole practical lab-based approach by taking those trainings myself and and that way I can appreciate and support the companies that are doing the right thing and not just advocating these bodies of pure knowledge, which I think they can create frustration in our industry, because I'll have folks ask about, well, how do I prove my capabilities? And then we'll tell them, well, it's not just certs, but all they see are certs that are
Yeah.
gatekeeping the way forward. Like, what do when I was hiring for IT, I was always looking for that X factor of how does this person solve a problem? And
Yeah.
is this a real passion of theirs? And what is that X factor for you when you're hiring for cloud security? What do you look for?
I look for side projects. I look for some demonstration or, kind of like hungriness that they have been doing this on their own time, to kind of ramp up for this position. I know that before I got my first cloud position, I had a GitHub set up. I had some projects that I already did, even very simple things like simple algorithms, or I went through some PHP tutorials and kind of like put that there for my software job. But for my security job, I set up like a HashiCorp Vault cluster, and I got the Terraform in there, and I put that up on my GitHub, and I linked it on my resume, and that kind of acted as my personal kind of like body of work. I know folks like to set up websites sometimes and have like a portfolio. I like to draw parallels to different professions as well. Like, this isn't unique to cloud security or IT, but photography, for instance, like if you're looking for like a wedding photographer or something like that, you're not just going to hire Joe Schmo off the street. You'd want to see a gallery of pictures. What kind of style do they like to do? What kind of lighting do they like to use? That's also the X factor that I like to see for candidates, is like, what kind of projects do you get into? What kind of stuff are you into? Are you doing some very like computer sciencey kind of theoretical stuff, or are you doing kind of more practical, I can deploy this today type of things? And if so, what kind of problem were you trying to address, and why were you excited enough to code this up? And what I love about Git is that as you commit onto branches and stuff, it has a history, and you can see kind of their thought process as they were moving through their Git history. It's like, oh, okay, so they refactored this program to do this, and then they put a shell script over it to automate, some of the infrastructure as code, and then they changed that shell script to a GitHub action when GitHub actions were released, and so on. And if I see that kind of process going on, I'm like, wow, this person knows how to solve problems. He knows how to solve issues. But it's always a mixed bag whenever it comes to GitHub projects, and I love to kind of see that in play. GitHub portfolio projects, whatever it may be. That would be the main X factor that I look for.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I think what we've done in this industry is almost gamified this whole like recruiting process of like, okay, how am I going to get in? Well, I have to clear these certifications. And then it becomes this neediness game of like, okay, I have to get this, then I'm ready. Excuse me. But then we don't talk about this other side of the coin where like, is this, once you get into that interview and you're in front of the hiring manager, what do you have to show off besides just your beautiful list of certifications? Is this a genuine passion of yours? And I think that's something that we just don't talk about enough in this industry, is like, we're so fixated with these certs. Yeah, I agree. Like, that's a huge deal, is making this a true like passion of yours, showing off your accomplishments, not just through known ways. Like, certifications are the obvious, but moving past the obvious and really achieving some cool stuff in your off time or in projects that you've done. I think people gloss over that layer of depth that is required in this field to truly show that you understand something. So
Right.
I hope we change things over time to really put that in the forefront more so than just this obsession with having this perfect resume. I hope that changes.
Yeah, indeed. I really do hope that changes as well. Um, as I've said before, it would be great to have that practical part in your certifications. It would be great to be able to list, projects that you've worked on that's been practical. I definitely love to see that. But another X factor for me is culture, right? How is the person that I am talking to, passionate about the position that they're vying for? And that one's a tricky one because you can't really teach culture. You can't really teach, how to be excited about cloud security. Um, a lot of folks, I feel like, have learned it to stay relevant, but they may not be as passionate about it as they were with their older technologies. Whenever some people, I think they really like it whenever they walk into a really cold server room and they turn that firewall on and they you hear the whir of the fans going on, and then you plug in your Ethernet cable and you see the blinking lights, and then you put in your terminal on your computer. I've heard love stories about this from traditional network engineers, but then whenever they say that you could just do that on the cloud, in many ways, with the one line of code, they're like, not as fun. Like I just did one line of code to set up this subnet thing that performs better than the hardware that I put my hard effort into, even put like a little sticker on my little touch, right? This is my firewall. And when they come into the interviews, it shows. It's like, oh yeah, with cloud, I can now do it with, a single line of code, rather than with cloud, I can do it for the single line of code. Isn't that awesome? I honestly don't have an answer to that one as well, but that X factor, that's another one, right? Like, if you're passionate about it and you have the projects, that's like a golden ticket right there. You not only have you demonstrated skill, but you've also shown your passion and willingness to learn. And I think that's part of it. Willingness to learn is like saying, while I was in this position, I adopted this way to cloud, or I said yes to this project because I wanted to learn more about it. Or I said yes to this title change or improvement, or moving to a different organization within my enterprise, or whatever it may be. But having a good story, a good demonstration of how you've shown that you can learn is a big deal. And I think it parallels with what we were talking about before. In the cloud has not stopped innovating. The cloud has not stopped adding new services on every day. Even though they may have 100 different services when you open up the AWS console, there'll probably be like a couple hundred, 300, however many in the future, right? And how is it whenever I'm, going to hire someone, how are you going to learn those new technologies? I think that's also a really big question that employers are asking when it comes to cloud security.
Yeah, it's true, Eric. It's a bittersweet goodbye for those of us who worked with on-prem systems, to kind of say goodbye to that skill set. It's really hard. I had the same thing go through my head this last week when I was building a VPC up on AWS, and you can build an entire subnets with the click of a mouse, and you can do it rather mindlessly, shockingly. You don't need like tons of expertise. You could not even you could barely know network architecture and kind of muck your way through it and actually have a working product. And yeah, you're right. Like I agree with that sense of it kind of takes away some things that you were really fond of and proud of achieving in your past if you come from LAN networking like I did.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I just saw a recent CSNP article on the importance of VLANs. I'm like, in MySpace, I don't know what a VLAN is. It's a subnet. It's a sub network, right? And
that's funny.
it was very parallel, right, to traditional security.
Mm.
But yeah, to your point, traditional security knowledge, or traditional proverbs, I should say, is always learn networking first, then go to security. Well, with cloud security, you don't need to do that. If you're working serverless, you have no control over the network. You don't care about the network. You are simply making code that runs into the cloud. that has its own security paradigm. You have to worry about secure code. You have to worry about identity and access management, but you do not need to configure firewalls or subnets or routing tables or anything like that, because it is simply on the cloud. It simply has been put into the ambiguous AWS, GCP, Azure network, and has an endpoint for you to use. And yeah, there's a lot of implications on data security. Where does the data reside? You know, that kind of stuff. But for many workloads, folks just want it to be done, and that's where the power kind of comes in with that. With containers, it's very different as far as networking goes, because all that containers are different Linux processes. It's separations of user space in Linux, right? There's different processes. But those processes now have IP addresses, internal IP address on this node, right? Which has IP addresses, and different like DNS schemes within a cluster than it is with the intra-cluster or inter-cluster, I should say. So it's definitely it could get very complex as well. There's definitely two sides of the coin when it comes to cloud, but definitely I feel like the traditional ways of thinking about security don't always apply in cloud. Yes, it's good to know. It's always good to know more coming into a situation, you know. But how useful it will be will depend on the position that you are vying for. So.
Yeah, I feel like someone like you should write a book on translating like traditional ideas into this new way of doing things. I think a lot of us need to see that, like myself included. We really have to reshape how we approach systems these days.
Believe it or not, that would have to be me learning about what the old systems were, because I was born in the cloud. So now I have to learn about, okay, what was a VLAN exactly now? Okay, and when you do these firewall rules, is it all IP tables under the hood? Okay, and how does that all work out? And knowing that you guys used to, not you guys, but on-premise people used to say, you know, software-defined networking versus not software-defined networking. In the cloud, it's all SDN, right? So it would be a journey, I guess, which might make a good book, a good journey of a cloud practitioner learning the traditional parts of security and translating those.
That's hilarious. Well, we're about time, but any last predictions from the Eric Evans crystal ball for at least the near future? Are we going to continue on this trajectory? Are all of our security operations centers going to be absorbed into this cloud whirlwind? What do you see moving forward? Just more of the same trajectory?
I definitely, for the near term, see the same trajectory going on. I do think it will flatten, you know, as time kind of moves on, and as organizations are like, okay, the cloud, we're there now, we're there. But I don't think that the on-premise data center will ever fully go away. There's still lots of implications about having something in the cloud, whether it be root of trust for encryption, for instance, or whether it be stringent kind of compliance requirements, depending on the field. Like if you're in the financial industry, there are certain things you simply can't have in the cloud. There's a lot of, there's still some use cases for the on-premise stuff, or there could be just, it won't ever work in the cloud because of the hardware that it's running on, and Amazon doesn't want to cater to one particular customer. That will always be the case, but until then, I think it will absorb all those other cases, all those other general cases, and have most workloads working in the cloud. I'd say within the next 10 years, if not sooner.
Yeah, after this year, it's really hard to predict the future for sure. So,
oh yeah, I know. I'm willing to be completely wrong on my predictions, right? So definitely no bets.
I'm so glad that someone with your expertise can pop onto the show and speak to this topic, because this is something that's on all of our minds in the security world these days. So always glad to hear from someone who's working with this stuff full time and is really focused on it. So yeah, thanks so much, Eric.
You're welcome. Anytime. Thanks, David.